Welcome to the pre-application information session for the Enhancing Investigation and Prosecution of Domestic Violence, Dating Violence, Sexual Assault, and Stalking Initiative, also referred to as the EIP initiative. My name is Aisha Battle, and I am the Associate Director at OVW, and on behalf of the Office on Violence Against Women, also referred to as OVW, and the Grants to Improve the Criminal Justice Responses team, also referred to ICJR, is convening this pre-application session to go over the fiscal year 2024 solicitation for the EIP initiative. Today, you will hear from OVW team members to include myself, LaShonda Beasley, Jason Patry, and Debbie Tanaka, and we have Natalie Teague manning the Q&A. The purpose of this session is to provide information regarding the EIP solicitation. We will highlight a few key points in this presentation. However, it is not the intent, nor is there sufficient time to go over every aspect of the solicitation. All applicants are responsible for reading the FY 2024 EIP solicitation and the OVW Solicitation Companion Guide, and ensuring that a complete application is submitted. ICJR team members cannot provide any feedback to applicants about the quality of an applicant's proposal or provide any information outside of what is presented in the solicitation. However, we will be available throughout the period that the solicitation is open to respond to any questions about application requirements. Please feel free to send questions about the EIP solicitation to the ICJR program email mailbox at OVW.ICJR@USDOJ.gov, or call the main line at 202-307-6026. It will be helpful to have the EIP solicitation in front of you for a point of reference during this information session. You may take a moment now to open it if you do not have it, if you have not done so already. Also, we will send these slides to you all after the webinar, so please do not feel that you must remember everything we tell you here. You may use the presentation alongside the solicitation and the companion guide as you prepare your application. Next slide. On the cover of the solicitation, please note that final applications are due by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 2nd, 2024. Applications are submitted through a two-step process. Step 1 is the submission of the SF-424 and SF-LLL in grants.gov no later than 11:59 Eastern Time on April 30th, 2024. Step 2 is the submission of the full application, including attachments in the Just Grant system. The application should be submitted no later than, as previously stated, 8:59 p.m. May 2nd. It is also recommended that applicants submit a letter of intent, which is optional and non-binding, to the ICJR program email box at ovw.icjr@usdoj.gov no later than March 25th of 2024. Please note that OVW will not accept late applications, so applicants are strongly encouraged to begin submitting their applications 48 hours prior to the application deadline and to carefully review the OVW policy on late submission, which can be found on page 23 of the solicitation. OVW anticipates notifying all applicants of funding decisions by October 1, 2024. Next slide. The EIP initiative is authorized by the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, Public Law 117 through 328, December 29th, 2022, 136, Statute 4459. Congress appropriated funding for this initiative to promote effective policing and prosecution responses to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, including evaluation of the effectiveness of funded interventions. This initiative encourages law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices to expand and improve their capacity to effectively investigate and/or prosecute domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and in doing so, support victim safety and autonomy, hold offenders accountable, and promote agency trust within the surrounding community. Next slide. Over the course of the next several slides, we will discuss the EIP statutory purpose areas that applicants may apply to, as well as the OVW priority areas that apply to the EIP initiative. Next slide. For those new to OVW grant programs, you may be wondering, what is a purpose area? Purpose areas provide the general guidelines on how funds are to be used under the grant program. Funds under this initiative must be used for one or more of the statutory purpose areas listed on the next few slides. The EIP initiative has 7 purpose areas that can be found beginning on page 5. As we go through the purpose areas, please note that there are ones that have an asterisk next to them, as the asterisk is to indicate that the purpose area is also related to an OVW priority area we will be discussing later in this presentation. Purpose area 1, to enhance law enforcement and prosecution responses to the 4 crimes: domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, which I will refer to as DVSAS as I read the purpose area. That this is to enhance law enforcement prosecution responses to DVSAS as part of a coordinated community response. Purpose area 2, to fund law enforcement officers, prosecutors, investigators, and victim assistants dedicated to handling cases stemming from DVSAS. Purpose area 3, to support the identification, implementation, and evaluation of trauma-informed investigation and prosecution strategy. Next slide. Purpose area 4, to support policies, practices, and protocols designed to ensure that DVSAS is promptly and thoroughly investigated and appropriately charged and prosecuted, consistent with the Department of Justice 2022 guidance on improving law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender bias. You will learn more about the DOJ guidance later in this presentation. Purpose area 5, to foster greater accountability, transparency, and building of community trust related to the investigation, prosecution of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Next slide. And our last 2 purpose areas. Purpose area 6, to provide and support training for law enforcement officers and prosecutors who handle investigations related to DVSAS, including but not limited to providing strategies to build a case based on trauma-informed, victim-centered, and offender-focused practices. And lastly, purpose area 7, to promote enhanced criminal justice data collection, tracking, use, and reporting regarding domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Next slide. Now we have OVW priority areas. Each year, OVW leadership identifies priority areas for which grant programs will give special consideration and/or point preference in the application review process. In FY 2024, OVW has 4 programmatic priorities. The 2 priorities identified in the solicitation that are applicable for the EIP program are: 1, increasing access to justice for all survivors, and 2, strengthening efforts to prevent and end sexual assault. Applicants are strongly encouraged, but not required, to address the priorities. Next slide. In FY 2024, all applicants meaningfully proposing to address purpose areas 1, 2, and/or 5 will meet this priority. Purpose areas 1, 2, and 5 are centered around creating avenues of access for survivors who choose to engage in the criminal justice system. Projects that meaningfully propose to implement this priority will address access to justice through implementing survivor-centered approaches and/or strategies within the criminal justice system. As stated before, an asterisk was used within the purpose area slides to indicate which purpose areas meet this priority area. Please note, to meaningfully address this priority area means that applicants should include appropriate detail in the summary data sheet, the proposal narrative, and the budget, which will all be discussed later in this presentation. Next slide. In 2024, to meaningfully implement this priority of preventing and ending sexual assault, applicants must allocate at least 25% of their proposed project activities and budget expenses towards addressing sexual assault committed by non-intimate partners. If found to be meaningfully implementing this priority area, applicants will receive special consideration. OVW will assess these applicants for special consideration during the application review process. Next slide. The EIP initiative solicitation lists specific activities that are outside the scope of the EIP initiative and will not be supported by the program's funding. Applications that propose activities deemed to be substantially out of scope may receive a deduction in points during the process or may be eliminated from consideration for funding. A complete list of out of scope and unallowable activities can be found on page 7 of the solicitation, and a complete list of unallowable costs begin on page 17. It is important to review these lists thoroughly, as applications may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration if they propose activities deemed to be substantially out of scope. Please note that out of scope activities include research, direct victim services, prevention activities, family violence services, services for children under the age of 11, and the creation of sex offender registry. Next slide. Activities that compromise victim safety and recovery. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. Please refer to page 6 of the EIP initiative solicitation and the OVW solicitation companion guide for additional details. Please note that applications that propose any activities that compromise victim safety and recovery and undermine offender accountability may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration entirely. Now, to take us on to pertinent federal award information in the solicitation is my colleague, Jason Patry.
Thank you, Aisha. We will now discuss federal award information as it pertains to the EIP initiative to include award period and amount, program requirements, eligibility, and related matters. Next slide. The solicitation provides details on the federal award information beginning on page 8. All awards are subject to the availability of appropriated funds and any modifications or additional requirements that may be imposed by law. There is no guarantee that funds will be available in the future. However, OVW may elect to make awards in a future fiscal year for applications submitted under this solicitation, but not selected for FY 2024 funding, depending on the merits of the applications and the availability of funding. The EIP initiative is making awards for up to $500,000 for a 36-month project period. All awards will be processed as new and will be made as grants. OVW has the discretion to award grants for greater or lesser amounts than requested and to negotiate the scope of work and budget with applicants prior to the award of a grant. Be sure to request the full amount of the award. Next slide. Recipients of an FY 2024 EIP award will be required to participate in 3 program requirements. All awarded applicants are required to participate in OVW training and technical assistance, to complete performance reports, and to participate in an assessment or evaluation. Details regarding these requirements can be found under the Program Requirements section of the EIP initiative solicitation. Next slide. The Department of Justice, DOJ, 2022 updated guidance on improving law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender-based violence is central to this solicitation and the EIP initiative this year. This guidance, which includes 8 principles, is intended to reflect and advance the department's partnership with law enforcement leaders, line officers, detectives, and other law enforcement personnel who work tirelessly to ensure that policing is bias-free and to uphold the civil and human rights in the communities that they serve. The department extends its appreciation to the many law enforcement leaders, victim and community advocates, and other experts who worked with us to develop the original guidance in 2015 and have provided insights to inform this updated 2022 edition. Furthermore, the department recognizes that law enforcement officers at all ranks in communities across the country work tirelessly to ensure safety and justice for victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. It should be noted that while this guidance focuses on law enforcement agencies, many principles also apply to prosecutors' offices. Next slide. The guidance provides several principles for departments to incorporate into their policies and training in order to improve investigations and ensure that victims of sexual assault and domestic violence receive a professional and appropriate response from law enforcement. We will go over the 8 principles now. Principle 1, recognize and address biases, assumptions, and stereotypes about victims. Principle 2, treat all victims with respect. Principle 3, ensure that policies, training, supervision, and resource allocation support thorough and effective investigations. Principle 4, appropriately classify reports of sexual assault or domestic violence. Next slide. Principle 5, refer victims to appropriate services. Principle 6, properly identify the predominant aggressor in domestic violence incidents. Principle 7, implement policies to prevent officer-perpetrated sexual assault and domestic violence and hold officers who commit these offenses accountable. Principle 8, maintain, review, and act upon data regarding sexual assault and domestic violence. Next slide. To learn more about the DOJ guidance, see the law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender bias and resource list. Each resource can be found on the OVW website. Next slide. Eligibility is mentioned briefly on the cover of the solicitation, as well as in more detail on pages 9 and 10. Eligible applicants include state, territorial, county, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies and prosecutors' offices that investigate and/or prosecute crimes of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking in the United States or U.S. territories. States, units of local government, and tribal governments may apply on behalf of law enforcement agencies and/or prosecutors' offices that lack the authority to apply on their own. Next slide. The solicitation details other program eligibility requirements beginning on page 10, to include required partnerships. Please note that each applicant must partner with a victim service provider or state, territorial, or tribal domestic violence and/or sexual assault coalition. The term victim service provider means a nonprofit, non-governmental, or tribal organization or rape crisis center, including a state or tribal domestic violence and/or sexual assault coalition that assists or advocates for domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking victims, including a domestic violence shelter, faith-based organization, or other organization with a documented history of effective work concerning domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. This can be found at 34 U.S. Code Section 12291, subsection A, 50. Victim service providers must provide direct services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking as one of their primary purposes and have a demonstrated history of effective work in this field. Applicants that do not meet this requirement will not be eligible for the EIP initiative funding and will be removed from consideration. Formal partnerships must be clearly documented in the form of a signed Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. Indian tribal governments can submit a letter of commitment in lieu of an MOU, but must submit an MOU if awarded funds. Next slide. Finally, the applicant and the required partner must, 1, have documented history of effective work concerning domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. 2, must provide direct services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking as one of their primary purposes. And 3, have a demonstrated history of effective work in this field. Next slide. And I will now hand it off to my colleague, LaShonda Beasley, to discuss additional application information.
Thank you, Jason. Next slide. I will now review the EIP application and submission information. A letter of intent serves to certify that an applicant is registered and current with the System for Award Management, or SAM, under the Unique Entity Identifier, UEI, number. The letter of intent for the EIP solicitation is due no later than March 25th, 2024. This letter is optional and does not obligate the applicant to apply. Next slide. Please carefully review the formatting and technical requirements on page 11 of the solicitation. Points may be deducted for applications that do not adhere to the formatting and technical requirements. Please read the entire list of requirements. I will also go through the list. The application should be double-spaced. Charts may be single-spaced. 8.5 by 11-inch pages. 1-inch margins. Arial font. Type no smaller than 11 font, except for footnotes, which may be 9-point. Page numbers, no more than 20 pages for the proposal narrative. Documents in the following format: Microsoft Word or Doc, PDF file, or a .pdf, or text document. Headings and subheadings that correspond to the sections identified in this section of the solicitation. Applications must include all of the following required documents: the proposal narrative, the budget detail worksheet and narrative, and a signed memorandum of understanding, MOU. The proposal abstract must be entered into a text box in Just Grants. Though it will not be scored, it will be used throughout the review process. Applicants are strongly encouraged to use the template provided in the solicitation of the abstract. Next slide. The data requested with application consists with 3 sets of questions: the pre-award risk assessment, applicant questionnaire, and the summary data sheet. You will complete each as a survey directly in Just Grants. These are not scored for you, but are required elements of your application. A list of these questions for each item is included on pages 41 through 49 of the solicitation and the appendices. Next slide. The proposal narrative section should not exceed 20 pages, double-spaced, and must include the required 3 sections: the proposal of the purpose of the proposal, what will be done, and who will implement the proposal. Reviewers will not read more than 20 pages double-spaced. If your application is not double-spaced, reviewers will only read the equivalent of 20 pages double-spaced. The remainder of the proposal narrative will not be scored. Make sure that you respond to every question within each of the sections, and headings are highly recommended. See pages 13 through 16 of the solicitation for more information. Next slide. In developing the proposal narrative, applicants are strongly encouraged to review the DOJ's 2022 Law Enforcement Guide, as familiarity with this guide is necessary to address the questions asked in the What Will Be Done section, question number 1. In the What Will Be Done section includes a small chart. Applicants are strongly encouraged to use the chart when formatting their answer to the first question in the What Will Be Done section. The Who Will Implement section should reflect the roles of key personnel and/or roles listed in the What Will Be Done section. When developing the proposal narrative, as stated earlier, headings and subheadings that correspond to the section identifies the solicitation should be used to include labeling the purpose of the proposal, what will be done, and who will implement sections. Please ensure that when you are prompt in addressing the proposal narrative, the answer should appear in the section in which the question is asked. Okay, so let's talk about the budget detail worksheet and narrative. This section must include a budget worksheet and budget narrative that links clearly to the project activities specified in the proposal narrative. The budget should be for an entire 36-month period and not divided by year, and includes sufficient funds for the disabilities or for who are deaf and hard of hearing, or describe other resources available to the applicant to ensure meaningful access to such people. The budget should also include sufficient funds for persons with limited English proficiency. The budget should not contain items that are unsupported by the proposal narrative. You should include your budget as an attachment to your application. A sample budget is included as an appendix in the solicitation, and the webinar on creating a budget is available on the OVW website. Next slide. Additionally, the budget must include funds to attend OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance, or TTA, in the amount of $20,000 for applicants located in the 48 continental states, and $25,000 for applicants located in the territories, Hawaii, and Alaska. Next slide, please. Applicants may allocate up to $50,000 to compensate victim service providers to include domestic violence and/or sexual assault coalitions for their work on the proposed project. Activities that service providers are projected to complete include such activities as establishing or enhancing referral policies and protocols, assisting with training efforts, developing or updating communication guidelines, and other collaborative efforts outside of direct services to victims. No more than 20% of the funding can be allocated to training and technical assistance activities. Please note that this 20% limitation does not include the TTA set aside of $20,000 for the 48 continental states, or $25,000 for applicants located in the territories, Hawaii, and Alaska. Later in this presentation, we will be joined by a member of OVW's Grants Financial Management Division to provide more information regarding budget. Next slide, please. We will now discuss the Memorandum of Understanding and Letter of Commitment requirement. Please carefully read the distinction between these two documents and identify which is required by your organization. Next slide, please. Applicants are required to submit an MOU, a document containing the terms of the partnership and the allocation of roles and responsibilities between two or more parties. The MOU must be a single document and be signed and dated by the authorized representative of each proposed partner organization during the development of the application. As the required partner, the victim service provider must be included as a signatory on the MOU. Next slide, please. Tribal law enforcement agencies or tribal prosecutors' offices or tribal governments applying on behalf of a tribal law enforcement agency or prosecutor's office that are unable to submit a signed MOU may submit a letter of commitment from each partnering organization. If funded, the tribal applicant will be required to submit a signed MOU as a post-award deliverable. Now, please help me welcome Renee Hansen, a budget analyst with our OVW Grants and Financial Management Division, or GFMD, and she will go into more details about the budget requirement.
Thank you, LaShandi. In the next couple of slides, we are going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to the documents that our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, or GFMD, reviews. And more specifically, we'll discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior years' applications that could help with expediting our review process. So for today, we are going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you with a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. First, we will highlight an item identified in the summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. And specifically what I want to mention is the single audit response. OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. And if they have, they then indicate that and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. Now, GFMD is finding that applicants don't always include all of this information. So please ensure that this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet, and it's question number 3. And the next item that I'd like to discuss with you is the pre-award risk assessment questions. And these assist GFMD during the pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to every question. There are 11 questions, and each question has multiple parts. Now, we've noticed from prior years that applicants don't always fully answer all parts of the question, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant, and this may delay funding decisions. Some of the most common issues that we have encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. Another example is question number 3. some applicants fail to provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. And these are just a few examples, but in general, just make sure that you read each piece of each question thoroughly and provide a full and comprehensive response. Next slide, please. All right, this next slide will quickly highlight some of the resources that are available to you while you're creating the budget to be submitted with your application. Over the last few years, GFMD has developed a detailed webinar presentation on how to develop a budget to be submitted with OVW applications. This presentation addresses some of the challenges that you may face with your budget and provides some insight on the budget review process. This webinar can be found at the link on this slide. Next slide, please. All right, next up is the uniform guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR 200. And you can use your favorite favorite search engine. Apparently mine's Google for this one. Other resources include the DOJ financial guide and your program solicitation itself. Next slide, please. All right, we know that this can be a lot of information to process. So if you have any questions about the GFMD information that has been discussed, please feel free to contact the GFMD help desk at 888-514-8556 or by email at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. And I just want to plug that these are monitored daily, and you will probably receive a quicker response if you email, but we do try to respond to every inquiry within 24 to 48 hours. But I will now hand it over to Debbie Tanaka to give you all an overview on how to apply to this solicitation using the two-step application submission process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the title of this solicitation, all of which can be found on the cover page. The FY 2024 application submission process is a two-step process with significant differences from the process prior to 3 years ago. Application materials will be submitted in grants.gov and Just Grants. We recommend starting the application process, even just the grants.gov and Just Grants registration process, as soon as possible to allow time for registration or renewal and to learn the system. Next slide, please. Read the solicitation carefully to understand all steps to submit an application and the time required to complete those steps. Some steps, such as obtaining the Unique Entity Identifier or UEI number, or registering with the System for Award Management, known as SAM, or grants.gov, may take several days to complete. We recommend that applicants begin these processes as soon as possible, but no later than April 9th, as suggested in the solicitation. Next slide, please. So grants.gov, applicants must complete the application for federal assistance, or SF 424, in grants.gov. The specific information required for this step is included on page 12 of the solicitation. Applicants must also complete and submit the disclosure of lobbying Activities, or SFLLL, in grants.gov. Next slide, please. After submitting these two forms, the applicant will receive an email notification to complete the rest of the application in Just Grants. If the applicant is a new user in Just Grants, the email will include instructions on registering with Just Grants. Next slide, please. Applicants will submit the full application, including attachments, in Just Grants. If you have applied for OVW funding prior to 2 years ago, you will notice some significant changes in the application process. In the Just Grants system, applicants will enter some application information directly into text boxes and surveys and upload some documents as attachments. We have included the following major elements of the application as examples of what applicants will submit in Just Grants. The proposal abstract will be entered in a text box. The pre-award risk assessment, applicant questionnaire, and summary data sheet will be completed as surveys directly in Just Grants. The proposal narrative, as well as the budget worksheet and budget narrative, will be uploaded as attachments. The Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, or Letter of Commitment, or LOC, will be uploaded as an attachment. In addition to these major elements, other documentation will be required for all applications or when applicable. Please read the solicitation carefully for a full description of all items required. Next slide, please. In Just Grants, each applying entity will have an assigned entity administrator who is responsible for managing entity level information and assigning roles in the system. The entity administrator is also the e-business point of contact, or e-biz POC, designated in sam.gov. For more information on registering with Just Grants, please refer to the website of justicegrants.usdoj.gov. Within 24 hours of Just Grants receiving your application from grants.gov, the user submitting the application in grants.gov and the SAM eBiz POC will receive an email to register for a Just Grants account. The email is from DOJ's Secure User Management System, known as DIAMD, and will include instructions on how to create an account. To ensure that you receive these emails and that they are not flagged as spam, we recommend adding the email address of DIAMD-no-reply@usdoj.gov to the trusted sender list in your email settings. Next slide, please. The eBiz POC at the applicant organization serves as the entity administrator and must log in to Just Grants to confirm the entity's profile and add users. The user submitting the application in JustGrants serves as the application submitter. Within minutes of completing their JustGrants account registration, the application submitter and the entity administrator will receive an email from JustGrants with a link to the application that was started in grants.gov. Alternatively, the application submitter can log in to JustGrants and locate the pending application in their work list on the home or landing page. The application number listed on JustGrants will be identical to the 9-digit number that begins with the word grant on grants.gov. Next slide, please. Each lead applicant must have at least one authorized representative designated on JustGrants. An authorized representative is an individual with documented authority to sign an agreement with the federal government. Before the application is submitted, the entity administrator must log in to JustGrants to review the authorized representatives associated with the organization. If an authorized representative does not have a JustGrants account, the entity administrator will need to invite them to register. Within minutes of being invited to be an authorized representative, the individual will receive an email from the DIAMD-no reply at usdoj.gov email address with instructions on how to create an account in DOJ's secure user management system. Once the authorized representative receives the email and completes the steps to create an account, the authorized representative will be available in JustGrants. Next slide, please. The application submitter will complete the application by entering data into web-based forms and text boxes, uploading attachments, and accepting assurances and certifications. The application submitter will also need to select the authorized representative or representatives. Once all sections are completed, the application submitter will submit the application. The application submitter, entity administrator, and authorized representative will then receive an email from JustGrants confirming successful submission of the application. The Department of Justice has made a collection of self-guided training resources, including training and a virtual Q&A session on application submission, available at the website displayed on this slide. I'll now hand it back to Aisha to finish us out so that we can address any questions that you may have. Aisha?
Thank you, Debbie. So federal civil rights law. Recipients of OVW funds must comply with applicable federal civil rights laws, which among other things prohibit recipients from discriminating on the basis of national origin and disability. This includes taking reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to grantees' programs and activities for individuals with disabilities, individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, and individuals with limited English proficiency. Applicants must include funds or other resources in their budget that support activities to ensure access to these individuals. Final applications in Just Grants are due by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 2nd, 2024. Carefully review the How to Apply and Submission Dates and Times sections on pages 21 through 23 of the solicitation for applicant actions with required deadlines and for OVW's policy on late submission. Submitting the application components at least 48 hours before each deadline, both grants.gov and Just Grants will enable applicants to receive notice of failed submission and provide an opportunity to correct the error before the application deadline. Next slide. So if you have questions, here are contact numbers to know and emails to know if questions come up during the process for you. If you have questions regarding what is programmatically allowable under this solicitation, please contact the ICJR unit either at ovw.icjr@usdoj.gov or call us at 202-307-6026. You heard from GFMD earlier that you can direct your financial questions to them at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov or call them at 1-888-514-8556. And then please note on the screen that technical questions about submissions, whether it be the first level of submission, grants.gov, or the second level, the Just Grant support on the screen for grants.gov. The email is support@grants.gov, or you can call them at 800-518-4726, or for Just Grant support, that contact is ovw.justgrantsupport@usdoj.gov, or you can call them at 866-655-4482. Next slide. Now we will turn it to the Q&A to answer the questions that were submitted throughout the presentation. I will ask my colleague Natalie T if she can field the questions for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isha, and thank you everyone on the team. We've gotten some wonderful questions and I've pre-answered some of them, but I've saved some of y'all's had some really great ones. So I saved them to pitch live. So go ahead and keep your questions coming, but I'm going to start with the first one. So can two different governmental organizations within the same geographic area submit separate applications and potentially both receive grant funds?
I think it would be helpful to know, I guess, to clarify that since this award is for law enforcement and prosecution, that the government entity applying would be a conduit of theirs. And so if there are two separate law enforcement departments within a jurisdiction, they can apply separately.
Thank you, Isha. And if that did not get to the heart of your question, please reframe your question and re-add it in the chat. Another question is regarding the organizational chart requirement. If a county is applying on behalf of a prosecutor's office, should we submit the county organizational chart or the prosecutor's office organizational chart?
Great question. You should submit the prosecutor's office's organizational chart. And so if this is the same case regarding law enforcement, then you should submit the law enforcement agency's organizational chart.
Thank you, Aisha. And we have lots of burning questions about victim advocacy and various types of victim advocacy activities that may be supported. So we're turning to those. Hold your thoughts, folks. One other one before we go there is, can funds be used on a diversion program for misdemeanor domestic violence cases? These would be for cases that are not deemed suitable to prosecute in court.
Please, as somebody on my team understands, I think we would need more information with what you mean. Can it be used for that, since the funding is for investigation and prosecution of cases? And I see, can the person that has their hand raised come on, speaker?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm part of a prosecutorial agency, and we do traditional prosecutions of many of these domestic violence and dating violence cases, but there are some cases that for various reasons are routed through other programs. They're alternatives to traditional court prosecution, and they generally involve either restorative justice, where we do some kind of like community panel that kind of hears the case and kind of recommends ways that they can be reintegrated into the community, or they meet with somebody who acts as a kind of panelist to kind of offer diversion terms. Essentially, like, if you do anger management or community service, then we won't go ahead and file this in court. So they're in the spectrum of prosecution outcomes, but they are not traditional court prosecutions. So my question was whether these funds could be used to in some way deal with those cases that go through these alternative programs.
Thank you for your clarification. And if anyone on my team has anything additional to say what I'm about to say, please feel free to come on mic. We do not support diversion programs, and we do support alternatives like different compliance dockets or relating offenders to batterers intervention programming. But we do not find it to be best practices to send people to anger management. And that's why I needed more information. But I will say, this program in particular is aimed at increasing the prosecutions. And so, as to what you described, I would recommend you looking at our Improving the Criminal Justice Responses program, which is the program that this is an offshoot of, that would be more in line with what you have described, and does allow funding for alternative prosecution solutions, as well as that funding can also be used to fund prosecutors. The difference is who would be the lead applicant for that program. State units of local government, victim service providers, courts, tribes, and coalitions are the lead applicant, but what you described can be funded under there. I think we like to think of those different prosecution alternatives is, for that program, framing them as compliance related would be helpful. And you can contact the same email address to find out more about that program. Does anyone have anything to add?
Yes, Jason.
No, I was going to say nothing else to add, but Mark, we can certainly help explore that question with you. And as Aisha mentioned, feel free to email us at the ICJR mailbox.
Great, thank you both for that.
And
Thank you.
Sorry, one thing, just to let you know, Natalie actually led us in a presentation of that solicitation last week, and we expect the recording to be coming out shortly, and that will be housed on the OVW website. If you would like to email us, we can also make sure that gets to you in time. Natalie.
Thank you. Yes, and I just dropped the link to that as well, to the OVW resources for applicants page. It does have a ton on it. It is chock full of information, including our fiscal year 2024 solicitation companion guide. But if you scroll down below that to program specific resources, there's a box for pre-application information sessions for fiscal year 2024. And in the coming days, you will see the recording posted for ICJR as well as EIP as well. And Aisha, if I may, I'm going to return. We've gotten, I think, a little bit more of a clarification on the last question. So to clarify, can a police agency and a prosecutor's office from the same geographical area both apply separately and potentially receive grant awards? I suppose through EIP.
There is nothing stopping you from doing that. I would say I would encourage you all to see if you could apply together, or if you want to apply separately, what is the best for your organizations.
Fantastic. And there's a similar question here. If our agency is currently a recipient of a fiscal year 23 ICJR grant, are we eligible to apply for the fiscal year 2024 grant? And I guess, actually, apologies, we would need some, I guess we can answer. For ICJR, there's a section about if you have pre-existing funding, I believe on page 15 of that solicitation, but you would be eligible to, so that would determine whether or not you could apply for fiscal year 2024 ICJR. But if you're asking about EIP, Aisha, I believe that yes, they could also apply for EIP, even if they had a current ICJR award. Is that right?
Yes, and you can apply for both the ICJR program and EIP. These are separate programs. And so technically this program has no grantees, and whoever is funded this year will be the first class of grantees.
So exciting. Excellent. We are so anxious to get our first class of EIP grantees. So I'm going to turn to the big elephant, at least in the Q&A boxes. And so the first, I'm going to go through these, they're all kind of on the same theme of supporting victim advocacy services. So we are a prosecutor's office in desperate need of a victim advocate dedicated to SADV cases. Am I reading correctly that this grant cannot fund a victim advocate's salary if they are providing direct victim advocacy services?
Yes, you are reading the solicitation correctly. Because this is aimed at enhancing prosecution and investigation, the victim advocate is there to help lend the voice of the survivor to improving policies and procedures and implementing the DOJ guidance. Now, we would like to recommend for you as well the Improving Criminal Justice Responses solicitation. The 7 purpose areas from this solicitation are very much offshoots of the ICJR program. The ICJR program houses this program. This has a different eligibility class, which is directly prosecutors and law enforcement. But to fund, you can fund prosecution and law enforcement as well as advocates to support them through ICJR, and there is no limit. There is actually an encouragement of direct services under that program. And so, and you can apply for them both. And so if you need advocacy in this as well as improved training and technical assistance, you can apply for both solicitations in order to meet those goals. But unfortunately, direct services from victim service providers is not allowed. And that is why there is a limit to how much they can be funded for. And I see someone with their hand up. Hannah?
I'm sorry to have to ask you to repeat yourself, but did you say that I understand that it can't be used for direct service that is done by folks outside of the law enforcement agency, but could it be that it funds a victim advocate or a counselor who's employed by the criminal justice agency?
Not to do direct services.
Okay. Okay.
Now, the Improving Criminal Justice Responses program that Natalie put the solicitation link to can be used for that purpose.
Thanks.
And there was another question related to that as well, of can the required victim service provider be internal? We are a prosecuting agency that already has a victim services unit. Can we use our own internal unit to perform the functions of a victim can we use our own internal unit to perform the functions of a victim service provider for this grant?
That would still be considered direct services for the purposes of this. And I encourage everyone to go and look at the victim service provider section of the solicitation, because we have at OVW a specific definition of what is a victim service provider as it pertains to this project. And that is one housed outside of the criminal justice system.
And then just to clarify, that last question, I think some of it was just asked whether if they have victim services within a prosecution office, if that satisfies the required partnership requirements for EIP. I believe that it does not, correct?
It does not. That victim service provider. Now, you can have them at the table, of course, informing you, because we do not want to say that their voice is not fruitful, but the partnership requirement is with a community victim service provider, so a nonprofit organization in the community.
Thank you, Aisha. And another twist on that is the answer the same for a law enforcement agency that has its own internal victim services division? Does that internal division meet the program requirements of the partnership requirement for EIP? No, correct?
It does not, but for you, I would refer you to the ICJR solicitation, where we are uplifting the co-responder model this year between law enforcement and advocates.
Yes, and I will say some of these questions came in early on, and I wrote a rather lengthy response. If you go to the answered section of the Q&A, there's a very long, lengthy response. And then there's also sites to the OVW priority area 2, which is the co-responder model, and where you can find that in the ICJR solicitation if that interests you. But just to go a little bit further on this, here's another one. I see on page 5 of the solicitation, item number 2 says it can fund law enforcement officers and victim assistance. So if I understand correctly, can we use some of this funding to pay for victim assistant to provide direct services? I don't want to get this wrong.
Under the out of scope activities, direct services is included there. And so you cannot use this funding to provide direct services. You can use the funding to train your victim assistant and in order to further your investigation.
And I just want to go back to many of the questions that were coming in about limitations on direct services, victims, what is the definition of a victim service provider? Again, the flagship ICJR solicitation that greatly supports victim advocacy. And so actual victim service providers and state domestic violence and sexual assault coalitions can apply directly as the lead applicant to ICJR. What makes EIP, this program specifically, unique is that the eligible applicants are prosecution offices and law enforcement agencies. Neither one of those can apply directly to ICJR on their own. ICJR, the only folks that are eligible to apply for that are states, tribal governments, units of local government, victim service providers that meet the definition that was just posted, state coalition, state domestic violence and sexual assault coalitions. So in other words, a prosecution project or a law enforcement project in ICJR has significantly, they have to come in with someone else, with another entity applying on their behalf for ICJR. For EIP, the beauty of this program is that this program is specifically funded to provide for prosecution and investigation, enhancing both, and both of those entities can specifically apply. And let's see, I see we have a hand raised. If you can unmute.
Hi, just a clarification, we are a law enforcement agency. We do have our own victim service specialists that work within the department, but they are employees of a nonprofit sexual assault center and a nonprofit domestic violence agency that are contracted to work within the police department. And would those be allowed to be funded under this if they train our officers on their specialties and provide guidance on policy, procedure, best practice, things like that, not doing any of the direct service work?
That is exactly what the $50,000 set aside for victim service providers is for. It's for them to provide training, for them to help inform upon the training that you all are developing, and well as policies and procedures and protocols. And so thank you. That is exactly, it can be used for that. And your victim service provider partner, just to take your example a step further, those organizations that they come to would be great organizations to have as your required partner on this project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the city domestic violence, let's see. So the city domestic violence prosecution office, the police department, and our county DV prosecution office use the same cloud-based digital evidence management system, but are all on different versions of the tool. Could we use EIP funds to work collaboratively with the system vendor, one, to get all agencies on the same version of the tool, two, to activate limited transcription services for those who are with limited English proficiency in the tool for all agencies? Could it be used to fund active function, allowing victim and advocates to submit digital evidence after the incident? Could the funding be used to work cross-agency to standardize how evidence is uploaded, labeled, and shared? And could the funding be used to provide training to frontline staff?
I think.
Do you want?
I know, I was like, well, that's a lot of different things. And I
Yes.
see, Bridget, is this your question? Yes, it is. Bridget,
It actually is. All of those are part of the system upgrade. We weren't sure. We've got two prosecutors' office and our largest law enforcement agency using a pretty slick evidence-based digital evidence tool, but they aren't talking. So if we could work with our system vendor to collaboratively work to get us all in the same system, make sure all of the transcription and LEP resources that are available through that tool are turned on for all agencies. And we work collaboratively for how that information is uploaded, stored, and shared in that tool. So we can kind of optimize evidence collection and for prosecution. We would also work with our victim service partner to make sure that as we're looking at evidence collection, be like on the scene and also victims upload later and prosecution practice are victim informed. But most of the money would go to our IT vendor to upgrade the system.
while what you described does fall under Purpose Area 7, I would say that given this is like both a grant fund and comes with intensive TA to help improve prosecution and investigation, spending the bulk of money on the data collection system may hinder your project, but it is what you described does fall under, for me, Purpose Area 7. Please, someone on my team speak if you have different thoughts. I will say, Bridget, what you described seems to very much fall under the ICJR program and under one of our statutory priority areas under ICJR regarding the sharing of information. And just to reemphasize what Natalie said is, of course, part of improving our handling of cases is, of course, leveraging the information we have and sharing it with our partners. This pool of money is very much intended to improve internal processes for law enforcement and prosecution.
And so that would not include SOPs and standardization of how you do evidence collection and make sure it's shared with your prosecution teams for prosecution with or without the victim. I feel like this kind of line, I mean, just because I feel like it is about how you can even work with you all to give us guidance on how to effectively work together to make sure that our evidence collection practices are appropriate and we're using the right tools. I just want to make sure as we're looking at collaboratively at the best outcomes, a lot of that has to do with information sharing and timely access to evidence. But I'll look at the.
I agree, and I think what you described falls under purpose area 7.
Okay. But it sounds like maybe you look at ICJR.
I would encourage everyone on this call, because you can be funded under ICJR, to look at both programs and see how you can leverage both or either one of them. And so this very much falls under. I also say this is a smaller program, and so I just want to encourage you all to maximize what you all are doing and want to emphasize the differences between the programs.
Thank you.
I see we have 2 more hands raised. I think, Sarah, you may have had your hand up first.
Yes, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm also on a prosecutor's office. My question is regarding the partnership and the MOU. So we do have MOUs with different, with organizations in the community. However, what I'm thinking will be our project, which will be enhancing our prosecution capacity, will not be tied to those maybe organizations that we partner with for maybe victims or things like that. Will this, like, we will be fulfilling the requirement of having that partnership of MOU just by providing maybe like that MOU, even though maybe it is not part of our project for this application? Or it is necessarily that that partner organization is part of the project we are asking money for?
Sarah, I want to make sure I understand you, so please let me know if I am not answering your question. As I understand, you traditionally partner with organizations in your community to support this work, and you would like to, you're considering under this initiative partnering with a different organization?
No, we're not considering to partner with
Okay.
any new organization. It's more, my question is, the project, once we apply to the solicitation, will not be including these partners as part of the project. We are asking money to be funded, but we do have partnership, right? And so my question is, are we fulfilling the requirement of the solicitation, showing that we have partnerships, even though maybe those organizations will not even be mentioned, maybe even during the project activities, for instance, or our narrative, because that's not what we are asking money for, you know?
I understand, Sarah. Thank you. Under this program, it is rooted in the CCR, as all of our work is. There is a partnership requirement where you would need to not just evidence your existing MOU that you have partners, but that you would need an MOU demonstrating how you would be working with that partner on this project. And that required partner is the community victim service provider. And so
Okay.
you will see in the proposal narrative section where there are prompts for you to address, that you are asked to detail how your partner organization will be involved in the project.
Okay, so following your answer, so it will so if we are asking funding, but that funding is not going to be used to maybe pay for that partnership, but however, we can demonstrate how that partnership will work within the project, even though funding are not going towards them, that's okay.
Yes, you can write that they are providing their services in kind. There is not a minimum amount of money that the partner should get, but we certainly want their work to be meaningful. And so if you all have an existing relationship, I would detail what that would look like. And if you are not funding them, how their time will be supported.
Okay, thank you. That was useful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Isha, before we go on, there's a somewhat related question as well in the Q&A. Can an existing MOU be used for this application?
It cannot. We require that a new MOU for specifically this solicitation be utilized. And so for both programs we have spoken about, if you are applying to both, you would need a different MOU for each one. And you would need an MOU that was drafted during the time this solicitation is open for the purposes of addressing it.
And Isha, there had been a question that I believe I answered already in the chat, but to follow up on that, the MOU is required to have a complete application, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Hannah?
I just wanted to ask back to what you were saying about purpose area 7 around data tracking, collection, reporting, etc. And if someone could just point me to the right part of the solicitation in terms of what would be appropriate external support to fund that kind of project. So if it wasn't, so like using different kinds of criminal justice consultants, other people who work in that area around, they're not necessarily, I mean, many of them probably are prosecution focused, but it's not a law enforcement agency, if you're following. It would be like getting external support to enhance what we're doing based on using practices that are used in other jurisdictions or other places.
Well, we will be providing that through training and technical assistance. That is why the amount of training and technical assistance that you all can take on is limited, because this initiative comes with a robust amount of training and technical assistance. And of course, asking you to speak to the DOJ guidance that was created and informed by many of the consultants that we work with, that we will be assisting you in addressing those things.
Specifically on purpose 7 around data.
For the program in total, yes.
Okay, in total. So whatever it is that we're proposing, essentially. Gotcha.
Yes.
If
that
it
falls
fits
under
within the purpose
area.
areas.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And Isha, there's a question in the chat that I was getting ready to answer, but I'll go ahead and pitch it live. So we want to find a system-based caseworker to work at an FJC, Family Justice Center, with domestic violence and sexual violence victims from the criminal justice system perspective to support the FJC, Family Justice Center. Does that qualify? Would it qualify for EIP funding, I believe?
I apologize. I think that people utilize caseworker differently, so it would be helpful to understand what duties they would have as the caseworker.
And what I was looking to respond is that they may also want to check out the ICJR solicitation, because that might be a better fit.
I think that you are correct. Typically, the caseworkers are providing some form of direct services or moving direct services forward. And this is really focused on law enforcement and prosecution. We, of course, want to always uplift victim services and recognize its importance. But we were very thoughtful in putting this together, knowing that we have a large funding pool for ICJR that can fund victim services, and a large amount of the funding for that program goes to victim services. This is our first opportunity that we've had to directly fund law enforcement and prosecution. And so we really want to uplift and emphasize that, because we know there is not a ton of funding going towards you all. And it is definitely an exciting opportunity for us.
Yes, and I'll just piggyback onto that, for ICJR, our current funding levels for fiscal year 2024 will be $500,000 to $1 million based upon the population's size of your service area. And there's also a potential additional $200,000 to increase that to $700,000 to $1.2 million if your application meaningfully addresses the sexual assault OVW priority area 3. And so again, you can see that in the ICJR solicitation. I do see a question. ICJR, will current awardees be eligible for the FY 2024 applications? So there's a section of this of the ICJR solicitation, I do believe it is page 15, that talks about that new and continuation applicants can both apply. However, if continuation grantees have 50% or more of their funding still that have not been drawn down, they would have to provide extensive explanation of why that would be the case. And continuation funding is not guaranteed. There is
Oh, sorry, Natalie. I just wanted to uplift that. I know that this was stated, but I know there's been a lot of talk about funding victim services. And so I just want to reiterate that the up to $50,000 is for all 3 years and not a single year. And so in looking at funding victim service providers' salary, I encourage you to look at the ICJR solicitation, which, as Natalie just stated, would allow you to pay them much more, like that is not capped by any means at $50,000 for 36 months. And Hannah, just to bring it back to what you said about paying a consultant to teach you all, if you refer to the solicitation on page 17, it states that there is a 20% funding cap on training and technical assistance activities that are outside of OVWs, because we have set aside quite the amount of funding in order to pay for training and technical assistance to help you across these 7 purpose areas.
And to that end, Isha, there's a question in the Q&A. Isha mentioned training available for this project, but I'm not sure if I understood it correctly. Is any information available on that training so that we may include it in our budget, or should we just set funds aside in the budget for use for this purpose?
OVW training and technical assistance is free to you all. There is a requirement in the solicitation detailed also on page 17 that, and I know that I believe LaShonda went over it earlier, that we do ask that you set aside $20,000 for the contiguous states and $25,000 for Alaska, Hawaii, and the territories for travel to our training and technical assistance. But that that the training and technical assistance that OVW funds will be free to you all to utilize. And so there is no need to set that money aside to utilize our training and technical assistance outside of the requirements on page 17.
This is your last opportunity. Well, not your last opportunity. You can always email us at ovw.icjr@usdoj.gov.
I apologize, Natalie. I see Sarah, you have your hand up.
Well, yes, if I may, in the last seconds of the Q&A. I'm sorry, it's regarding again the partnership. I was reading in the solicitation, right, when they define the victim service provider, but it also says that you can be part of a coalition.
Yes.
So if you're part of a coalition that and you have an MOU that you work with a coalition, that will fulfill the requirement of the MOU. And I don't know if I understand correctly the paragraph there, but.
Yes, you can partner with the victim service provider or coalition, one of the recognized state DV or SA or dual coalitions, and that partnership needs to be evidenced by an MOU that was created for this project. You can 100% partner with the coalition. You just need a new MOU with them.
Thank you.
Of course. Sorry. Well, to finish out what Natalie was saying, thank you all. It has been such a pleasure to be with you. We are super excited about this program. It has been something that we have definitely been wanting for quite some time, and to see your turnout for this pre-application information session has been wonderful. Again, our email address is in the chat. Please do not hesitate to reach out. And when the recording is available, we will definitely send you an alert to let you know. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.